Hey everybody, Ben here. I just wanted to come on really quickly and share with you something I created for you that I'm very excited about. I'm a big fan of using our mind and the tools that we can use within it to begin to create our life, our ideal life, the way that we want to. There's many different things that we can do this. And I know that if you're listening to this, you already believe that you have the power to be, do, and have whatever you want. You already believe intuitively that you can create your life by design. But often I find people, as much as they believe it, they keep kind of repeating programs of the past. They keep, self-sabotaging at times, running into the same issues or even having struggles of the same. So maybe, continuing to struggle with money, maybe continuing to struggle in relationships, continuing to struggle in creating the body and the health and fitness that we want, or whatever it might be, maybe your own personal happiness. So what I've done for you is I've created I think it's about 5 or 6 minutes, but a visualization that you can use, a guided visualization to help you achieve your goals. I know there's things that you want. I know there's things that you can have and you can be and you can do. And so I wanted to give you a tool that you can apply in your life to begin to create that in your life and create it in your mind so it begins to show in your outer reality. So if you go to benspangle.com/gift and you can download that visualization for free, the guided visualization on achieving your goals. All right, let's get you back to the show. Hey, everybody, welcome back. I've got my friend Sachin Patel with me, and I am excited about all the guests we have on the show. I do have to say I've been looking forward to this one for a while. I got to meet Sachin and his wife, Deepa, at a dinner we were at in Toronto with Evan Carmichael, which was amazing. And I've been looking forward to us doing the show ever since then. I want to tell you guys a bit about Sachin. Sachin is a husband, he's a father, he's a philanthropist, and their practice that they've built is functional medicine practice success coaches. So they've obviously run their own successful practice, and then they teach others how to do the same. He's an international speaker, he's a best-selling author, and my experience of Sachin, the time that I had, is he's just a very kind, caring man and human. And I couldn't be happier to have you on the show. So thanks for being here.
Ben, thank you. It's my absolute honor. And I've been looking forward to our conversation since that day as well. So, everything happens at the right timing. So there's never been a better time for us to have this dialogue. And I'm excited to share. Thank you for hosting me.
100%. You founded the Living Proof Institute. And I don't know the story about this, so I want to hear about it. From what I read about it, was as part of your own personal transformation. Can we actually start with that before we dive into anything else?
Yeah, sure. So my original training, and I'm still I still bleed chiropractic, is that I'm a chiropractor. I started off in a sports clinic. I started off working with elite athletes and high performing individuals, Olympians, people of that caliber. And so I was actually working with really healthy people who were active, people who would come in and say, well, I didn't make my sub 3-hour marathon. What can you do to help me? Right. And we'd find ways to improve and optimize them. And I really enjoyed doing that. And I love the challenge. I love helping people who are deeply committed to their health take it to a whole new level. And I loved kind of looking at the whole body instead of just looking at the site of the injury or the site of, where their complaint was. So I've always had that philosophy of the body can heal. Let's get and find the root cause, and let's look at the whole picture. And, a few years into practice, I had the honor of being on the news. And it's funny how these things happen. So my boss at the time had frozen on live television prior to that. And so the opportunity actually came to her because she's the owner of the clinic. And she's like, Patel, you do it. Like, I can't stand the idea of going on TV. And so I'm like, okay, I'll do it. So 2 years into practice, I'm excited that I get to be on the news and get to, share the good work that we're doing in the world for people. The story that they ran was about elbow pain. So also known as lateral or medial epicondylitis, tennis elbow, golfer's elbow, as it's commonly known as. And so we helped this lady, Connie, get rid of her chronic elbow issues despite having surgery and physiotherapy. And so that was the story that they ran. And they ended up running that during the sweeps, which is a time of the year where they're trying to get a lot of ratings. So it was a good placement of the segment that they did. And that afternoon when the story ran, I still remember I was working on patients and the phone just kept ringing. And my front desk staff called me up to the front. They said, like, all these people are seeing you on TV right now, and they're calling to
Wow.
make appointments.
Wow.
And so here I am, like, super excited until people started coming in, because the people that called in were actually really unwell. They were terribly sick with chronic health challenges and things that I didn't really know what to do with, because I was used to working with healthy people, not people who were metabolically frail or unwell, people with, chronic challenges like fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, autoimmunity. I mean, I didn't even know what these conditions were because that wasn't really my area of expertise. So after a handful of patients, I had to start asking them, like, why are you here? Because, we went from seeing some of the healthiest people in our community to now seeing some of the sickest. So it's an interesting spectrum. And right around that time, after I started, kind of turning these patients down because I couldn't help them, I got an email from this gentleman named Dr. Ron Grisanti, and he was sharing case studies of how he was helping people with the exact problems I was turning down. And so timing was perfect for me to explore a little bit further and say, like, hey, like, if he's helping people, maybe I can do this. Turns out it was within my scope of practice in Ohio to run these labs and do this type of testing and get to the root cause. So I took his training program. I was one of the first graduates, and we're talking 2006, so like 17 years ago now. And I took the functional medicine training, which was so new at the time. Nobody had ever heard of it. None of my patients had ever heard of it. None of my staff had heard of it at that time. And
Functional medicine.
Functional medicine, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I started applying the principles I was learning in the training to myself. So I gave up gluten, I cut out dairy.
Okay.
And this persistent fatigue that I used to have, I didn't realize how tired I was until I wasn't tired anymore. I didn't realize how achy I was until I experienced no achiness, because I grew up my whole life experiencing, achiness and stiffness in the morning. I remember my hands always used to be so stiff that I could never squeeze them until it would take them 20 minutes to half an hour to warm up. And when I gave up gluten and dairy, that all disappeared. And we're not talking months or years. We're talking within days, it started, these symptoms started to disappear. I used to have chronic digestive issues that I didn't realize were digestive issues until my digestion actually improved and became optimized.
What would you, just even for my own interest, when you say not realizing digestive issues, how would you explain those?
So I wasn't digesting my food very well. My stools weren't as formed as they should be. In hindsight, I grew up being very constipated. Never really thought about it, but I would use the bathroom every couple of days instead of multiple times a day to relieve my bowels. And when you realize what normal is, and what's normal to you and what's optimal, sometimes there can be a gap or a variation between that. So I realized I'm grateful that I'm alive and I'm relatively healthy and well. And from the outside, you wouldn't necessarily know that these issues were going on inside of me. But it's, again, not until you can contrast what real health feels like that you start, wanting it for others. So like whenever my chiropractic patients would come and they would come to the office and I say, hey, do you experience any stiffness in the morning? And they would say, no. I'm like, you must be lying, because I have stiffness in the morning. Like, how do you not have stiffness in the morning? Because that was just normal to me. So once I learned about functional medicine, it's just like, a whole new paradigm opened up for me, and you just simply can't look back from there. And so since then, I'm now gluten-free. Personally, I'm vegetarian for spiritual and religious reasons. So I've been able to find what works for me. I haven't been sick in, I can't, over 15 years, haven't missed a day of work. I have great energy every day. Like, I've been able to build multiple businesses and travel the world and speak. And then I teach this to other practitioners. And what I believe as a practitioner is that real health starts with us. So we have to be that role model and that example of what's possible to other people, just like you're a role model and an example for what you do for others. And so that's a long-winded way of sharing with you where my story started. But it was because I was, experiencing what I didn't even think were challenges until I started resolving them, and then experiencing the contrast and how different I felt.
I know it's an estimate, but as best of an estimate, what percentage of the population do you think that's the case, that they're not even aware how much better they could be feeling?
Well, I would say, probably close to 97% of the population.
Really?
Yeah. Most people, the definition of health for most people is if they don't have a disease, they think they're healthy.
Right.
Right. And that's like saying, if you take a car, let's say you take any car, maybe your car, my car, from the day it was pulled off the lot and today, right, even if it's just a year old, it's not the same. Right. There's room for improvement. There's room for optimization. There's degeneration that's taking place. Yes, it gets you from A to B, but it's never quite the same. And what we believe in our philosophy is that, and this is the approach and paradigm that we want to live in, is not what disease am I preventing, but what level of health am I creating? And so our focus isn't disease prevention, it's health creation, because there's over 10,000 different diseases that somebody could be diagnosed with. You can't wake up each day trying to prevent each and every single one and have a different plan for each and every single one. It's way too overwhelming, and it's not a good way of even approaching the problem, right? Like if I was to put into my GPS where I want to go, I would not put in all the places I don't want to go. I would put in exactly where I want to go, and it would get me there. Yeah. So health kind of works the same way, right? What we focus on, we facilitate it. So if we focus on health creation, we create health. The brain can't think in negative. So if I focus on preventing, let's say, cancer, well, guess what? I'm giving that cancer energy by simply thinking about it, talking 100%. About it, preventing it. Just like, if I say, don't think of a pink elephant, that's all you're thinking about. So disease is kind of the same way. But if I tell you to think of X or Y or Z, then the brain also thinks in that direction. So we focus on health creation because we believe there's so much more potential there. Yes. Right. And, the type of people that we love working with are, not the people that wait for their car to be stuck on the side of the road. Certainly we can help those people, right. With a flat tire, out of gas, like just completely, busted up. We like working with people who ask themselves, how can I get the most out of this car? Right? How can I take the best care of it? And where can I improve and optimize its performance so it's even better than when I bought it, right? There's people that buy a $250,000 Porsche and they take it right to a tuner and spend another $80,000 on it so they can get an extra couple hundred horsepower out of it, right? Or it sounds the way they want it to, or they, they dress it up a little bit. So I love working with people with that type of worldview. You don't have to have a Porsche budget, right? My philosophy is that it should be affordable and accessible to people. And that's what we try to do, is provide lifetime value for the clients that we work with instead of temporary value. And when they can recognize that, they start realizing, that being healthy is actually way, way easier, way more rewarding than disease prevention. Because how do you even know if your disease prevention strategy is working until much later?
That's a great point.
But if we focus on health creation, we can see the benefits and experience the benefits of it right now.
Yeah, I love that. It's so good. Even what you're talking about of just how, the brain focusing on it. I mean, if I'm focusing on avoiding disease, ultimately it's still the pink elephant, right?
Right.
And then from a consciousness perspective, I mean, we know consciousness creates, right? So not only in the brain, but that's another conversation for sure. And I think in my own life, if I can comment on that too, there was a period of my life where outwardly, I would say I was focused a lot on the things that I could do, different superfoods and all this kind of stuff. And it took me this is only in the last few years I realized it. But what I realized was I was actually coming often from a place of fear in these, and labeling everything, whether it was good or bad for me. And sometimes still labeling something, this isn't good for me, and then ingesting it into my body. And I remember Wayne Dyer writing that a lot about what we think about what we eat impacts what's going on in the body too, not just what we're physically eating. Yeah. So anyways, I love what you're talking about.
Yeah, thank you. And simply to add to that, I think you bring up a very wonderful point, and I want to double click on it, is that we are more than what we eat. And this conception that we have around food is quite interesting and fascinating. We can definitely unpack it a little bit more. But however, it's interesting, funny fact is that we live in the first time in human history where people complain about eating healthy. And what people focus on a lot is what they eat. However, what I've recognized, working with, so many people is that, and oftentimes, just for reference for the audience, like people that come to us, we're not their first kind of pit stop, right?
Right.
They've been to multiple different practitioners, and they're finally, frustrated enough to, take a slightly different approach. And so when they come to us, they're like, I've tried this diet, I've taken these supplements, like nothing seems to be working.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them, like, do you know someone who doesn't eat this way, that doesn't have these problems? Right? Somebody who eats like a seemingly unhealthy diet, but they don't seem to have these issues. And they're like, yeah, I get so mad at those people. I'm like, well, so it's possible to
Right.
not have digestive symptoms and issues
Yeah.
by eating unhealthy, right? So there might be a new paradigm that we need to think about, not just what you're eating, but how you're eating. And how you feel about what you're eating,
100%.
and the timing of what you're eating. Like all of these nuances play a huge role. And, we live in a society where we can get anything at any time of the day that we want. And, we don't have necessarily the guidelines, to identify exactly what's optimal and best for us. So there's more to food than what we actually eat. When I ask my clients, do you chew your food? The overwhelming response from most of them is no, right? And that's one of the first steps. The first, there's two steps to, what food is going to do for you, or when it comes to nutrition, there's two main steps: what you're going to eat, right? I guess when you're going to eat would be another one, but the second one is how much you chew your food. So think of digestion like a car wash. Every step relies on the previous step being done, and you've got to go in the right order. And so when we chew our food, we increase the surface area. By increasing the surface area, we taste the food better, which allows our brain to understand what macronutrients are coming, how much fat, protein, carbohydrates are coming. It satiates us a little bit more because we're actually chewing the food. It increases oxygenation of our brain when we chew our food. It helps promote healthy dental health. And the other thing that it does is it helps us in making more stomach acid. Because it relaxes us. So chewing actually relaxes our nervous system because we have a built-in reflex. So every time we chew, it tells our body to relax and go into a state of digestion. So a big thing, and certainly we could talk more about this, is what we call autonomic pairing. So pairing your nervous system with the activity that you're trying to accomplish. So for example, if somebody's eating on the run, right? Like there's a place here called On the Run, right? And I'm like, it's such a terrible name for a food place because you should never eat and run or walk or be active while you're eating. Like imagine somebody eating on a treadmill.
Right.
Right? Like how silly that would be, because their body is competing on where to send blood. Right? Should I send it to the legs? Right. Which is the priority in a fight or flight situation, or should I send it to the stomach?
Right.
And if we eat under stress, there's an 80% decrease of blood flow to our digestive system. Wow. So there's a mismatch between what we're trying to do and consciously and what's happening at an unconscious level. And when we can live in the awareness of what is the state of my nervous system, and is it paired with the task that I'm trying to accomplish, that pairing of your nervous system and the activity is so paramount and so overlooked. When there's a mismatch between the state of your nervous system and the activity, that is usually where all disease starts.
Well, so I guess it probably goes without saying, but the same thing, somebody working through their lunch, they're eating, but they're, doing a work task or whatever, same kind of concept. Yeah.
Well, the consciousness is another part of it, right? Am I consciously aware and present to what I'm doing? Right. I think, that's an important thing to take into consideration. And for some people, if you're just watching like an episode of Seinfeld, for example, that's different than trying to hack away at your emails, right? Because one is going to calm us down and relax us and release endorphins. The other one is going to raise cortisol. And that's going to have the opposite effect of what we're trying to accomplish. So we can do certain things, like certain tasks. Like for me, I love watching reruns of Seinfeld. It's like my favorite thing to do. So if I need to relax, that's one of the things I'll do.
Who's your favorite character?
You know what? I love George.
Do you?
Yeah. He's like such an amazing actor. I love Kramer. I mean, they all have their own,
for sure,
characters, but I love George. I just love watching him as a theatrical actor because he's so good at what he does. But and I was like literally 10 feet away from him in the Bahamas on a slide.
No way. Okay.
Yeah, I'll tell you that story another time,
Yeah,
but
I love that. Yeah.
it was really funny to see him up close and personal.
Yeah. That is funny. Now that makes sense though. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. As you said that, it actually took me back to when we were having dinner, and I do remember now you talking about the importance of chewing. That had long left me since our dinner. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm going to start focusing on that a little bit more. I know I certainly rush through my food for sure. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's an easy thing for us to do. So a lot
Right.
of people listening to this are probably guilty of it, right?
Mm.
So one of the simple things that we do is we give our clients a chew counter, and a chew
Okay.
counter is just a little device you put on your finger, and with every bite you take, you just roll the little wheel,
Mm.
and so then you'll know how many times you're actually chewing your food.
Mm.
When you chew it, the more you chew it, the better it's going to get digested, the more
Mm.
relaxed you're going to be, and the
Mm.
more you're going to get out of the actual meal that you're having.
Is there a sweet spot, an ideal you want to chew? I understand different foods take more, but chew this many times. I'm biting into an apple.
Yeah, so general rule of thumb is you want to chew about 40 bites. That's what we recommend.
40 times.
Yeah. And of course, it's going to depend on what you're eating, right? So some things are
Wow.
going to be a bit easier to chew through. Some things are already mechanically chewed up for you. Like, for example, if somebody, I'll use a sandwich as an example. If somebody's eating bread,
Yeah.
right, then like a lot, that flour is already chewed up for you. It's going to
Yeah. Yeah.
dissolve in your stomach. But if you're eating a salad, here's an interesting fact for you, Ben, is that when you're eating a salad, we actually, humans don't have the digestive enzyme cellulase to actually digest through the cell wall of the salad. So for example, if you were to swallow a salad, and you can take this on as a challenge, if you were to swallow a salad, just big chunks of lettuce,
Yeah.
you would poop them all out in exactly the way they went in the next day.
Hmm.
So when we're eating plant-based foods, if you look at a piece of lettuce or any
Hmm.
plant through a microscope, the cell wall is made out of cellulose.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have the ability to digest through that cell wall. The only way we can access those nutrients is through breaking open that cell wall when we chew. So this is why blenders can be good for people who can't chew,
Mm-hmm.
because they're extracting that nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
This is why it's important for us to tell our children to chew their food,
Hmm.
and get them to pay attention, because if we are feeding them healthy, nutritious foods, we want to make sure they're chewing them so they're getting the nutrition out of that food that they're eating. So when my son was very young, every time I would wipe his butt in the bathroom, I would show him the quality of his poop.
Hmm.
And I would see big chunks of carrots in there. I would see pieces of apple in there. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you see that? That isn't just food. It's nutrition,
Yeah.
right? And it's money. And we're literally flushing it down the toilet because you're not
Hmm.
chewing your food properly. So paying attention to how well we chew our food allows us to extract more nutrition out of it, allows us to get into the right digestive state, allows us to taste our food, allows us to release the right amount of enzymes,
Hmm.
and helps us produce saliva, so we drink less fluids with our meals. I mean, there's a whole cascade of things that happen just by simply chewing our food correctly.
Wow. When you said 40, I think, man, I don't know if I chew 4 to 6 times sometimes,
And
I'm
you'll
going to
find,
work on that.
yeah, and you'll find that you'll eat a more appropriate amount. Sometimes
Right.
it's when we don't chew, we eat so fast that we don't allow our
Yeah.
stomach receptors to stretch and tell us that we're actually full.
Hmm. Well, that's great. One of the things I love about what you teach and help people with is that a lot of what you teach it costs nothing and can completely transform their health. And I know one of the biggest things we'll talk about later is one of those very things, right? So I really appreciate that about your
My pleasure.
message. Can we talk about it? Because I know we've talked about this before and I'm very interested in it. I don't know if I'm calling it the right, but the genetics testing that you're able to do. And yeah, if you can expand on that, what that actually does for people, what kind of doors it opens. I'm very personally interested in learning more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many different lab tests that people can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not here to say one's better than the other, but what I am here to say is I like to look at lifetime value of any test that I do.
Mm-hmm.
And the test that I can say, in my opinion at least, has the greatest lifetime value is looking at somebody's genomics.
Mm.
And genetics and genomics are two different things, and one's a subcategory of the other.
Okay.
So genetics is looking at somebody and saying, you've got this gene, therefore you're going to have this disease, right? Or you're more likely to have this disease. Genomics is looking at the interplay of different genes and their unique variations. So we all have very similar genes, but how those genes are being expressed and the efficiency and effectiveness of those genes can vary. So looking at that allows us to then identify key environmental factors, key nutritional factors, key stress factors, and we call these epigenetic factors, things that are within our environment and within our control in most cases. Like, we can't control everything, but we can control most things. And allows us to then choose and make the best decisions to best express our genes. So let me give you an example. There's no good or bad cars, right? So if you go to the Porsche dealership, like any one of those cars is like a beautiful automobile. But if I take the 911, which is the sports car, if I take that off-roading, right, it's not designed for that environment.
Right.
But if I take the Cayenne off-roading, then it is specifically designed, to be in that type of environment. So I think it's important for people to understand that we're all beautiful individually and we all have our unique gifts and capabilities, but some of us are going to have different buttons that we can push that will activate different parts of us. Some people need to eat more fat. Some people do better on a lower fat diet. Some people do well with carbohydrates. Some people, it's best advised to avoid carbohydrates. Some people have genetic variations that make them more prone to stress and anxiety. And knowing that, we can identify exactly what micronutrients to supplement them with so that they can help flush out the stress hormones as they produce them.
Wow.
So we can look at these nuanced ways of helping somebody, identify how to optimize their operating system. And, some people, for example, might be more sensitive to blue light than others. So they need to pay special attention to that. Some people, like myself, don't do well with long distance endurance type activities because of how much there's a specific gene that I have that doesn't work optimally. It's called the superoxide dismutase gene. So this gene variation affects how my body handles stress, in the mitochondria. So oxidative stress in the mitochondria is something that my body doesn't do well with on its own. So I have to support it supplementally and by also choosing the right type of exercise routine. So I do better with high intensity, short bursts of exercise versus long duration cross country type of training. So we can look at these, like there's
all of this through genomics.
Yeah. So all of this can be identified through genomics. And the beauty of this, Ben, is that formula for you doesn't change. Right. So I'm not going to come back to you next year and be like, hey, I think you need to be eating this way, or
get the spinach now.
Yeah, we screwed it all up. We got to do it differently.
Yeah.
So the value of that test is it allows you to lean into an operating system, create a personal operating system for yourself that's never changing, that you just get better and better and better at. Right. And so, you don't have to do it all at once, but you can slowly implement, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Yeah. And now you have a personal playbook for what works for you, and what works for you and what works for your loved ones could be totally different. Wow. I mean, there's certain things that are, what we call panaceas, right? There are certain things that benefit everyone, right? Getting sunlight in the morning, that's going to benefit everyone. Getting good night's rest, that's going to benefit everyone. Breathing correctly, that's going to benefit everyone. But there's certain things that can be nuanced, and that's where you can get that extra few degrees of improvement and optimization. And over the course of many decades, that starts adding up.
That's amazing. I can't wait to do that. I'm super interested in that.
Yeah, thank you. And it's one of those tests that I like that has additive value. So as every year passes or quarter or whatever, the test becomes more valuable because the skills become more grounded.
Right.
Whereas blood test is great because it tells us kind of what's going on or what was going on really. Blood work a lot of times is like looking in the rear view mirror. Genomic testing is like looking through the windshield. Right. So one's going to inform us on, hey, this is the path I need to be taking. Right. And if we look in the rear view, we can see where we've been. Right. And we can, and that's like, lab testing. So I think both have value, Both have merit, and we use them, both in our practice. We do stool testing, genomic testing, hormone testing, whatever is necessary for the client.
Right.
But we love the genomic test because it's something that we don't have to retest. It's very accessible and affordable, and it's something that becomes more valuable over time.
And maybe I'm totally out to lunch on this, but from what I understand, I mean, you guys live in Canada as well. I don't think there's a lot of this in Canada typically, is there?
A lot of
like what you're doing, that kind of testing and everything.
I would say there definitely needs to be more.
Yeah.
I know when I, moved back from the US, I guess it was almost 10 years ago now. So about a decade ago, I practiced in Cincinnati, Ohio for many years.
Yeah.
And then my wife and I are originally from Toronto. So after we had my son, we moved back.
Yeah.
And there was nobody doing this at that time that I could identify.
Right.
And so I've trained a bunch of people in the GTA that are now offering this, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. But there's the way we put it together is kind of unique to the clients that we work with and how we view it. Right. So it's not just the test, but it's the paradigm as well that I think is important. So the testing is actually done here in Canada. There's a company based out of Mississauga, which is just down in the same town that I live in. And the lab sends the samples, the DNA samples, to a lab in Montreal. So it's all done within Canada, but the majority, and the irony is the majority of the test kits that they ship out are to the US. So this is, because they work with clients in the US as well. And that's where the majority of our clients are as well.
Is in the US. Okay.
Is in the US, because I feel like here in Canada, things take a little bit longer, right? And even to get covered, but to even for people to have that awareness. And I feel like many people, the majority of people, it's usually 80% of people, are still stuck in that old paradigm of until I get sick, until I have a disease or some sort of major crisis, I'm healthy.
Right.
Whereas the next generation, people like yourself, myself, and even people younger than me, and they're starting to scratch their head and being like, okay, I don't know if that strategy is the strategy I want to deploy for my health. Right. So people are becoming, more proactive when it comes to their health, and they're looking for solutions like this where they have clarity instead of confusion.
I think, and again, obviously it's my own view of the world, but the overall paradigm of getting old is changing too, in the sense that obviously, yes, we do age in years, but you don't have to be old and decrepit. You don't have to be, old in years and frail and weak. And so I'm even noticing, and again, I know it's my own model of the world, but it seems like that's changing more and more. And I'm seeing for myself more people in their 60s and their 70s that are very fit, active, healthy. And I remember thinking when I was younger, it's like, well, once you got there, and this was a lot in my family history too. Once you got there, you're like, wheelchair, you're struggling, everything. Right. So it is interesting how that's beginning to shift, I think.
Yeah, it's a new world, and here's the thing I want everyone to know is that if they can keep all their organs and stay relatively healthy for the next 5 years, they'll probably live another 50 than they expect. So
say that again.
So if you can stay pretty healthy for the next 5 years, keep all of your organs in pretty good shape, then there's going to be technologies that are going to help us add another 50 years on the back end of our life. So right now, the average person lives till, their late 70s, 80s. Like, it's not unreasonable for people to expect, especially people like you and I, to expect to live to well into our hundreds, like into 100, 120. I think that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
And the technology already exists for us and the knowledge and the wisdom already exists for us to be able to do that. But there will be technologies that will be coming, more to mainstream, becoming more mainstream and available to people that will extend lifespan significantly. Now, the importance of knowing that and paying attention to that is that you've got to keep everything 50 years longer, right? So imagine you were given this car, and in your head, like most people, like, oh, I'm going to have this car for 7 years, so I'm going to take care of it as if I'm going to have it for 7 years, right? And after a couple of years, you stop taking it to the car wash, you stop getting the oil changes on time, and then you're like, okay, 7 years after that, I've used it up, and now it's somebody else's problem if I sell it. But your body's not that way, right? So imagine getting this car, thinking it's only going to last you 7, and then being told, well, hey, you got to keep this car for another 5 years, right?
It's a great
You probably would
analogy.
have taken care of it a little bit different. So I always tell people, like, listen, if you live to 120, every morning you wake up, you got to ask yourself, these teeth have to last 120 years. Am I taking care of them as if
Right.
they're going to last that long, right? My
Right.
brain has to last that long. Like, you want all of your organs
Right.
lasting for that 120 years. And, certainly there'll be 3D printing organ. I mean, they already do that. I've had my stem cells preserved, right? So I had my hairs from my beard plucked, and they can grow stem cells from the follicles of your hair and then cryogenically freeze them. So if I ever need an organ printed or something like that in the
Wow.
future, they'll have the capabilities of doing that. So there's all kinds of really fascinating technologies that are already available to us. I mean, not necessarily, I mean, they're available to everyone, but most people aren't thinking of these things, right? They're busy
Crazy.
solving other problems in their lives. Health
Yeah.
oftentimes takes the back burner.
Wow. That's amazing. Huh. I want to talk about, I think one of the things that you're most passionate about, and what you've called the greatest wellness, I might be butchering it a little bit, but the greatest wellness strategy you've never heard of, the greatest wellness technique you've never heard of. And I'd love to jump into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's. It's a good question. I mean, my knowledge on this is somewhat limited. I've got a small practice that I get into, but why don't you start with this? I know what the answer is. Obviously, we're talking about breathing and breath work.
Yes.
But maybe let's start with why I even want to consider changing what I'm doing in this area.
Okay. So I always tell people that I could prove to you how important breathing is in 5 minutes or less. Okay. So let's start by holding our breath.
Okay.
Okay. And if you were to hold your breath for more than 5 minutes, right, you'd quickly find out how important it is. And,
For sure.
What's interesting about breathing is that we actually have a built-in mechanism that we can't actually hold our breath till we die. We actually pass out, and our brainstem starts breathing. Like, that's where the signaling comes from, and our body starts breathing for itself. So it's such an important thing that we can't even stop doing it, even if we wanted to.
Right.
Okay. We can stop eating, we can stop drinking water, but breathing is not something that we can stop doing. Now, here's the interesting thing about breathing. We eat about 2 to 3 pounds of food a day, but we consume 30 pounds of air each day. So we actually consume more air than anything else that goes into our body. And for every 10 pounds of body fat and body weight that we lose, 8.4 of those pounds is through the lungs. So our lungs actually, not only release some of the moisture that is a byproduct of cellular respiration, which is energy production, but the other aspect of cellular respiration is CO2. So our body gets rid of CO2 through the lungs. The urge to breathe actually isn't an urge to get more oxygen into the body. The urge to breathe actually comes from the urge to release and get rid of the CO2, because CO2 is a toxic molecule in our body. It's an important signaling molecule, but it can also be toxic at high levels. So breathing is like one of those things that we take for granted. We pay attention to the first breath when a child is born. When somebody is about to pass away, we pay attention to their last breath, right? Yeah. And we're honored and grateful if we could be there for that person to witness that, and for ourselves to witness it. So in my lifetime, I've been able to witness my son's first breath, and I've been able to witness my grandmother's last breath. So I kind of get to see both ends of the spectrum, but nobody talks about breath in between. It's rare to think about it, because we just assume that we're breathing and we're alive, so we must be doing it right. However, what I've learned over the years in my search for the simplest thing that we could do to get healthy and improve our health, my search led me to breath work and breathing. And, the yogis and people in the East have been saying this for a very long time. So they've got ancient practices of pranayama, of Tai Chi, of Qigong, right? These are all things that have been around for thousands of years. So we know that when we can control our breath, then we can control our biology and our physiology. And there's so many ways that I can demonstrate to you that our body uses our breath to change its emotional state and its biological state. And when you start realizing that and start putting it together, you're like, oh my God, how come nobody taught me this? So what I believe breath is that it's the zenith of simplicity and sophistication. It's so simple to do, and it's so nuanced and it can be nuanced that it can be very sophisticated as well. So if I wanted to improve digestion, I can show you how to breathe. If I wanted to increase focus, I can show you a breath for that. If I want to increase circulation, I can show you how to breathe. If I want you to release endorphins, I can show you how to breathe. When you get a runner's high from exercising or running, it's the breath that gives you the high, not the activity.
No
So I can show
way.
you how to
Really?
replicate that. Yeah.
Wow.
So breath is something that is part of so much of what we do, but it's happening at an unconscious level.
Yeah.
And my invitation to people is to raise it to our conscious level,
right,
so that we can actually grab, our nervous system by the steering wheel. So I refer to the breath as the steering wheel of the nervous system. And a regulated nervous system, when you can control it, is one of the most important health assets that you have. So with my breath, I can direct blood flow to my digestive system, right? So if I slow down my breathing before I have my meal, extend my exhales, okay, or do something like box breathing, where I breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and then repeat that. Doing that for a couple minutes is instantly going to ground me, and it's going to increase blood flow to my digestive system.
Wow. It's
If I
amazing.
Yeah, and if I want to de-stress, so if I'm experiencing a stressful situation and I just don't want to bring it into the house, I don't want to bring it into my next meeting, I don't want to bring it into my next conversation that I have, well, there's a breath that we can use called a physiologic sigh that helps us instantly go into a relaxed state. And we can quickly practice that right now because it's so simple and so easy.
Yeah.
So what you're going to do is you're going to take a nice deep breath in through the nose. Tongue is placed at the roof of the mouth. Take a nice breath in. And at the very top, just take a few extra sips through the mouth or the nose and just hold it at the top. And on the count of 3, you're going to release with a loud, audible exhale through the mouth. 1, 2, 3. All the way out. Another nice deep breath in through the nose, tongue at the roof of the mouth. A few extra sips at the top, really pack that air in. And on the count of 3, let it out with an exhale. One more time. 1, 2, 3. One more. Deepest breath you've taken all day. Nice deep breath in through the lungs, in through the nose. Hold at the top after taking a few extra sips. And on the count of 3, we're going to let it out with an audible sigh. 1, 2, 3. All the way out, all the way out, all the way out. And then you can find your normal breathing pattern. Tongue at the roof of the mouth, breathing in for 6 and out for 6. And you're just going to stay in that breathing cadence. It's going to feel slow. It's going to feel weird when you first start doing it. That's the default way I encourage people to breathe. Tongue at the roof of the mouth, breathing in for 6 seconds, out for 6 seconds. The slower we breathe, the longer we live. So the greatest predictor of lifespan is lung capacity. And if you look at animals across respiratory rates and lifespan, you'll notice that the animals that breathe the least per minute live the longest. Turtle breathes about 4 breaths per minute, can live up to a couple hundred years. A dog, on average, takes about 35 breaths per minute and ages 7 times faster. So in Eastern philosophy, we're born with a certain number of breaths in our lifetime. In Western medicine, we're born with a certain number of heartbeats. Now, we can't control the number of heartbeats actively and directly, but we can indirectly control our heart rate by controlling our respiratory rate. So when you think of the physical aspects of breathing, it makes sense that breathing is one of those lead dominoes. So for example, your rib cage houses your lungs, right? So when we breathe in, the rib cage expands a little bit, but most of the pressure goes inwards. So with every breath we take, the lungs expand when we inhale, and that squeezes the heart. And by squeezing the heart, we mechanically assist it in pumping blood through our body. When we breathe in and out, our diaphragm moves up and down. The diaphragm is referred to as the second heart. Our heart literally sits on our diaphragm. So as it moves up and down, right? So with each breath, we inhale and exhale, our lungs are expanding and contracting, our diaphragm is moving up and down, and all of that is assisting the heart in pumping blood. The biggest lymph nodes in our body are underneath our diaphragm. And so as our diaphragm is moving up and down with each breath we take, it's also moving all that sludge and lymph. And lymph is basically a waste product that's produced by our cells and organs. So by breathing correctly, we assist our heart, our circulatory system, and we also assist our lymphatic system in moving the sludge that accumulates, especially in the trunk organs. The other thing that happens when we breathe correctly is that it starts increasing the production of certain chemicals and molecules in our body. So it behooves us to talk about breathing and not talk about how to breathe correctly. So we'll back up just a little bit. The correct way to breathe, and there's 3 gears to breathing. The first gear, and that's where we want to be like really 99% of the time, is breathing in through our nose, out through our nose, with our tongue gently placed in the roof of our mouth.
And why the tongue?
So great question. So the tongue ideally should be placed in the roof of the mouth for a few reasons. One, it creates the shape of our face. So when our tongue is sitting in the roof of our mouth, it pushes our upper palate forward and outward. What this does is it creates a nice open airway for us to breathe through. My son, as an example, was a mouth breather. So his tongue would stay in the bottom of his mouth. And because his tongue would stay in the bottom of his mouth, his upper palate was really small. And so when we went to the dentist said he's going to have his teeth pulled. There isn't enough room for his teeth. And I started scratching my head and, I'm like, the body's perfect. Like, I don't understand why this would happen. It doesn't make sense that he would have too many teeth. Like, that just doesn't compute for me. And then I started learning about how our tongue positioning and whether we breathe through our nose or our mouth affects our facial structure. And so he got a palatal expander put in to expand his palate, which is, a several $1,000 piece of equipment, an appliance for the mouth. But if his tongue was positioned correctly, it would have been doing that the whole time, his entire life for him. So
how old was he when?
He's 13 now. And we started this process about 1.5 years ago with him.
Wow.
And all of his teeth have come in, so we didn't have to have any of them pulled.
Amazing.
And his breathing has improved. So his airway is nice and open. He tapes his mouth at night. He wears a nose strip at night. And you can see his facial structure is also very different as well from where it was when we started. So positioning our tongue in the roof of the mouth acts as a spacer. It acts as it also acts as a soothing device as well. So there's a little magic button in the roof of our mouth. It's called a mudra. And when we place our tongue in the roof of the mouth, it almost instantly relaxes us. This is why children suck on their thumb. This is why children love pacifiers. This is why they are instantly soothed when they suck on their mother's nipple if they're breastfeeding, because it presses that magic button in the roof of their mouth and it instantly relaxes them. Okay, so the same button is there for adults as well. If you think about how somebody would be breathing if a lion was chasing them, I like to use extremes. So if you were in a super high fight or flight type of situation, your mouth would be open and you'd be huffing and puffing. Your tongue would be hanging out of your mouth, right? The opposite of that would be nice, slow, controlled breaths, tongue in the roof of the mouth. When you place your tongue in that position, it also makes it impossible to breathe through your mouth. So if you just place your tongue there, it naturally seals your mouth. Okay. The mouth is the dirtiest part of our body. So anytime we breathe through our mouth, we take whatever the outside air quality is and make it significantly worse because we're inhaling all this bacteria that shouldn't be making its way into the lungs. So breathing through our mouth is actually quite catastrophic to our health. It puts us in a more fight or flight situation. That's the signal that we're sending to the nervous system. It doesn't correctly cause the spacing of our teeth and our jaw to form, so our airway becomes more narrow. When we breathe through our mouth, it dries out our saliva, which kills the oral microbiome, which is the cluster and collection of bacteria that protect our teeth and our gums. And when we don't have good oral bacteria, then we're more prone to cavities. In fact, mouth breathing is the number one cause of cavities because it dries out our saliva. The other thing that happens when we dry out our saliva is that microbiome stops producing nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is a molecule, it's a signaling molecule that kills viruses and bacteria on contact. It naturally dilates the blood vessels, allowing for a natural decrease in blood pressure because the blood vessels will dilate, and it increases microcirculation. So nitric oxide is the mechanism through which Viagra works. When Viagra was being studied as a medication, it was originally being studied as a medication for hypertension.
Really?
And the way it works, the mechanism is that it recycles the nitric oxide that your body is making. So it doesn't help you make more, which would be the right thing to do. It helps you recycle whatever you're making. But the men in the study, most medical studies are done on men, notice an interesting side effect. And that side effect was, an increase in microcirculation, especially, down there. And so that became the next blockbuster drug. Wow. So we actually make nitric oxide if we breathe correctly and eat the right foods based on our oral microbiome.
You got natural and free Viagra.
Natural and free Viagra. So our nose is actually lined with erectile tissue. So when we think about, so our genitals and our nose are actually, from a tissue standpoint, very similar to one another, because they contain this erectile tissue that's responsive to nitric oxide. So it's kind of a interesting like fun fact about the nose. So our nose, in contrast to breathing through the mouth, our nose actually purifies the air. It temperature regulates the air. It moisture regulates the air. It pressurizes the air, which allows 20% more oxygen to be delivered to the alveoli, which is the bottom, of our lungs. And it allows us to actually kill viruses and bacteria on contact because we're making more nitric oxide. And that's where that's one of the, there's many reasons not to breathe through the mouth, and there's a dozen reasons to breathe through the nose. So once we fix that for people, that breathing in through the nose, out through the nose for 6 seconds, that's going to be the most relaxing, grounding breath. We call that resonance breathing. That's when our heart and our brain are going to be most connected to one another. And there's lots of research. You can look up heart math. There's lots of research to demonstrate that. The second gear of breathing is breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. Remember, the urge to breathe comes from not needing more oxygen. We only absorb about 25% of the oxygen that we breathe in with each breath. The urge to breathe comes from a buildup of CO2. So as we become more metabolically active, as we start walking around or maybe doing a set at the gym, instead of going from your nose in and out and going to the mouth in and out, there's another gear. Breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. Okay, so think of your nose as an intake, perfects the air. Think of your mouth as an exhaust, right? It's a way of letting go.
And we're doing that in a state like that because you're producing more CO2.
Right. So you're going to have a strong urge to breathe.
Right.
And, lengthening the exhales. So letting out the CO2, but lengthening the exhales is actually going to get more oxygen delivery to the cells.
Question for you, going back to the nose to nose breathing. 6 and 6 is ideal. Is longer better if you can?
Well, it depends on what state we're trying to get into. If we're trying to get into a more relaxed state, right? Let's say you want to go to sleep, right? If I'm checking my email or reading a book, I might do 6 and 6, right? But if I'm wanting to go to sleep, I might do 6 in, 10 out. So if we lengthen the exhale, it puts us into a more relaxed and more parasympathetic state. And then the third gear of breathing is in and out through the mouth. And that usually represents, if we say 1% of your day, it's about 14 minutes, right? So 14 minutes of your day, you're just kind of like gassing yourself and you're going in an all-out sprint, right? That's when it's a true fight or flight situation. My wife and I were recently downtown Toronto going to an event, and I was keynoting and speaking about breathing, actually. So we did an exercise and we said, I wonder how many people are actually mouth breathers versus nasal breathers when they're going for their walk to work. And we couldn't find anyone that was breathing in and out through their nose. Everyone was breathing in and out through their mouth because they're unconscious, right? They don't know there's 3 gears to breathing. They don't know that the way that they're breathing right now is actually increasing their anxiety and their stress and their stress hormones in their body, right? Whereas if I want to feel calm and relaxed, the first thing I turn to is my breath.
Yeah.
Because the breath is the steering wheel of the nervous system.
I can only imagine too, as obviously in your own life, but then people you've worked with, that they begin to practice this, like all things in life, but the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes that you now are unconsciously walking around breathing through your nose.
Right. Yeah. We want to become unconsciously competent. And here's the thing. It's kind of like driving, right? So if you've driven the same route every day for like years and years and years, or even just a couple of weeks, eventually you become unconscious, right? And you just somehow you get there. You don't even remember like the details of the traffic or the stoplights. You just know I started here and somehow like I just, consciously made a few turns, but most of it was an unconscious process and I'm here. There's always an opportunity for us to grab the steering wheel. So whenever I do a self check-in, and I'll do that throughout the day, like some people, they check into their phone, right? And the research shows people check into their phones 100 times a day. Well, what if we just attached how am I breathing to picking up our phone, right? Just that would raise our consciousness of how we're breathing several hundred times a day. So we'd go from 0, to a couple hundred times very quickly. And once we can do that, then it just becomes second nature to us. So for me, it's become second nature to just, how am I breathing? That's the first question I ask myself before I ask, what am I doing?
Wow. This is amazing. I love this. This is the most interesting conversation I think I've ever had on the show. It's so fascinating to me.
Thank you. And literally, we're just scratching the surface. Like
I can only imagine.
There's here's another fun fact. You breathe in more molecules of oxygen with every breath you take than there are grains of sand on the entire planet.
You breathe in more molecules of oxygen than there are all grains of sand on the entire planet.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just kind of blows your mind, right? And you can fact check it. When I heard that, I fact checked it. That was the first thing I did, and it's actually accurate. Wow. So imagine like you take 23,000 breaths a day, you consume 30 pounds of air a day, you're moving like an entire universe in and out of you with every breath you take. It is the one thing that you can manually override to switch yourself from a fight or flight state into a relaxed state. Works faster than your mind, and works really well with your mind, but it works faster than your mind. And it's a thing that our body unconsciously uses, right? We don't even realize we're using it. So I'll give you a few examples. There are certain breathing signatures that we have. So one is the sigh, right? So when we feel a sense of relief, we sigh. Now, what happens is we have the emotion and then we have the breath. And it's actually a two-way street. So you can induce the breath and create the emotion. So what you probably noticed after those 3, deep breaths and releases, that you probably felt like you were just a slightly different state, if not a significantly different state. And I know we're in a calm, relaxed environment right now. But if you were coming in from a stressful environment, right, and you just wanted to let it go and switch your state, then you can do that pretty instantly. If a lion were to walk into my office right now, the first thing I would do is I would gasp, right? Well, what does gasping do? It rapidly inflates my lungs, so my heart can start mechanically pumping faster. So it instantly raises my blood pressure, right? And instantly now start sending blood to my arms and legs, so I could run away from whatever's chasing me. When we do things like hum, right? Humming increases nitric oxide level by up to 15-fold. Wow. So by simply closing our mouth, humming our favorite song, for 5 to 10 minutes, we're going to create this protective mechanism of increasing nitric oxide. What also happens when you hum is you lengthen the exhale, right? So you might take a breath in, and then as you're humming, your exhale is going to be like, 10, 15, 20 seconds. So it's naturally putting you into a relaxed state.
Wow.
When we sob, right? Sobbing is actually a form of breath work. Right? It's a way of actually releasing emotions. This is why letting children cry is actually very beneficial for them instead of telling them to stop crying, because then they bury their emotions, as deep down as they can.
Hmm.
Laughing is a form of breath work, right? So there's actually classes called laughing yoga where
Okay.
you can go and you might be in whatever mood you're in, but you start
Yeah.
inducing that breathing signature.
Yeah.
And guess what? You start laughing because now you're creating the chemistry of laughter and happiness in your body. So
Yeah.
we can use our breath to create whatever emotional experience we want to have as well. And it's a two-way street that most people don't realize.
Wow. This is amazing. I know we're scratching the surface here. We'll have to do this again. I thought of maybe one day we could even do one, how we can help our children incorporating a lot of these ideas that we're talking about. I think that'd be super cool. Again, very interested myself.
Yeah, my pleasure. I would love to. I think it's a topic that deserves a deeper dive, and
Right.
it's so practical. That's the other thing is,
Right.
and it applies at every stage of your life, right? So if you have
Right.
young children,
Yeah.
like when I speak about this, a lot of times parents will come up to me like, "Oh my God, like
Yeah.
I'm so glad you told me this because
Yeah.
my son has this issue or my daughter has this issue." Like
Yeah.
a lot of ADD, in fact, about 30% of people with ADD and ADHD
Yeah.
diagnosis have dysfunctional nighttime breathing.
Wow.
And
Wow.
the upper limit of our metabolic wellness, right? So you're only as well as how you breathe while you sleep. That's the upper limit of your
Really?
health.
Hmm.
Because when we sleep, that's the most parasympathetic healing regenerative thing that we do.
Sure. Sure.
But if your breath, which informs your nervous system, right, is, for some people, they're barely breathing. For some people, they stop breathing throughout the
Mm-hmm.
night.
Mm-hmm.
66% of people breathe through their mouth,
Mm-hmm.
right? So their tongue is not in the right position. They're breathing in and out through the mouth, informing their nervous system that they're under stress. So they're doing the most relaxing, healing, regenerative thing that they should be doing, but they have the most dysfunctional breathing.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine somebody snoring during the day, how exhausted they would be at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is why people wake up in the morning and they're more tired than when they went to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes them a while to actually get going. This is why people wake up and their blood sugar is high because they had fight or flight breathing
Mm-hmm.
while they were sleeping. So I'd expect it to be high, not to be normal or low.
Mm-hmm.
It's why people wake up and they don't have morning erections because they were breathing in and out through their mouth, and that's killing their nitric oxide production. And nitric oxide helps increase microcirculation.
Mm-hmm.
It's why people wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. So when you breathe through your mouth while you sleep, it acts as a diuretic. It affects a hormone in your body that helps you, that tells your body to get rid of excess fluid and water, right? So it affects a hormone called aldosterone. And so when when we breathe through our mouth versus through our nose, it has like a domino effect on our overall health. So a tip I want to make sure we share with everyone is something called mouth taping.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably the most inexpensive hacks, or if you want to call it that, or
Mm-hmm.
biotuning exercises you can do. You can just get some tape like this. It's called 3M micropore tape. And a lot of times when people talk about mouth taping or hear about mouth taping, they think, oh my God, I could never seal my mouth closed. Like that sounds
Mm-hmm.
crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially what we're doing is we're just putting a piece of tape like this. So I can still talk
Mm-hmm.
and I can still breathe through my mouth if I need to.
Mm-hmm.
But this is going to keep my mouth in a nice closed position while I sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to keep my tongue in the roof of my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to open up my airwaves correctly and prevent me from snoring.
Mm-hmm.
And so now my metabolic health, my healing, my regeneration, my recovery is going to be far better than it would have been if I was sleeping with my mouth open and snoring.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually, like, I have so many case studies of people, they just start taping their mouth at night, and within 2 days they have energy to wake up, go exercise, tackle their day. They don't feel exhausted anymore just by doing this, like, literally 5-cent intervention of taping their mouth closed at night.
This is amazing. I had bought, I don't know when this would have been, probably 2 years ago. I remember reading a book, James Nestor's book on breath, right? And then his colleague that he did those studies with, Anders, I think. I can't remember his full name. Anyways, doesn't matter. I had come across I think I sent you a picture of that one day, that little breathing device, right? But in that, though, a little bit of mouth tape. But then I had bought this other mouth tape, and I don't remember what the price was, but it was not 5 cents a thing. So like that, what you just talked about, you don't need a fancy mouth tape. Just, what did you call it? Microport? tape?
Yeah, so it's called 3M micropore tape. It's a surgical tape.
Okay.
It does come in like sensitive skin versions as well for people who have it.
Cool.
And literally, like um, we're so conservative with like I like to think of health as being something that's embarrassingly simple. Like that's our philosophy, is how do we make being healthy embarrassingly simple? So this is like an embarrassingly simple, cheap,
Yeah.
inexpensive thing that your
Yeah.
entire family could do
Yeah.
that will significantly improve their health while they sleep, and everyone wakes up better. But we actually sometimes will reuse our tape. Like I don't, because the tape doesn't work the second day for me, but my wife, she'll like just put it on her nightstand and even reuse it. So it's like pennies a day,
Sure.
you know, to improve a
There's
third
no excuse.
of the time we, you know,
Sure.
to improve 8 hours of how we breathe at night.
Wow. Quick question on that. If someone's sick, they're stuffed up in the nose, is this a time we would not do this? Or you still, if I do that, that's actually going to help me?
Yeah. So there's actually nose clearing exercises that you can do.
Okay.
And it's again, embarrassingly simple, but people can look it up if they want more details. But essentially, if you take a deep breath in and let it out with a relaxed exhale. So breathing in is an active activity. Exhaling is a passive activity unless we make it active. So breathe in, you just let it out, relaxed breath. So we're not pushing the air out. We're just going to a neutral position, and then we hold our nose. So we close our mouth, plug our nose, and we might have to move our head around a little bit, you know, shake it up a little bit. But within, you know, doing that for a few breaths, your nose clears right up. It's like magic.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm not exaggerating. This is, by the way, this is going to be when this comes out, this will be, I think, somewhere around the 106th, 107th episode of the podcast. And I mean this wholeheartedly. This has been the most interesting conversation I've ever had on here. And I want to thank you so much for this.
My pleasure.
I know you're living your purpose, and you're on a mission you're not on a mission to impact the world. You are impacting the world. And that there's no exception to that today. There's a lot of people that are going to be benefiting from this. And thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend, for the opportunity to share.
It's wonderful. I want to direct people to it. We'll have it in the show notes, but you've actually got ultimate breathwork bundle that people can get. Can you tell us a little bit about that? We'll put it in the links for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, when I speak about this topic, I get so many requests, like, how do I learn more? How do I go a little bit deeper? So I've recorded a bunch of videos, exercises. There's even a keynote in there that I've shared. And I also, in that bundle, have a breathing signatures guide. So it shows you the different breathing signatures that you can incorporate. Some of my favorite apps are in there. I've got a stop snoring guide and bundle that shows you exactly how to stop snoring, the exact apps I use, the exact exercises, all that stuff is listed in there for you. And I actually have a 90-minute breathwork session that you can do as well. Just go to the video that I share, pop in your headphones, and then it could be with you and a loved one, or even a group of friends can do it together. I give you the step-by-step instructions, and it's almost like a psychedelic, transformational, like ceremonial experience that people have. So that's also in there as well. And It's all free. It's my gift to the world. I want this information in as many hands as possible. And so all they have to do is go to Breathwork with Sachin, enter their contact information. I have nothing to sell you. I just want to help you, and they can learn more. And then I'm always available if people want to dive deeper and they want to work with me or someone from my team on a more intimate and personal level. But I think that this is a great place for a lot of people to start. You mentioned one of my favorite books of all time, James Nestor's book, Breath. I would definitely encourage people to look into that a little bit more. There's another great book called Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McEwen. And I wanted to share this. I went to James Nestor's retreat in Costa Rica. Just this past year in March, and I took all my notes down and I put them in a Google document, and that's also available in this free bundle as well. So you're getting a ton of a ton of value in there, and it's only my hope that more people incorporate this into their lives. I think the world would be a much better place if we learned how to breathe, be in control of our central nervous system, learn how to use our breath to regulate our biology. And it's something that we can all do instantly. So it doesn't take months or years, or you don't have to fly anywhere to learn how to do this. You can do it all from the comfort of your home. And it positively affects every generation in your family. So if it's your kids, if it's yourself, if it's your parents, if it's your loved ones, like there's just a huge number of people that could benefit from learning this information.
This is amazing. This is so great. So breathworkwithsachin.com.
Correct.
Okay, awesome. We'll have that for everybody too. And then for people, can you tell people your Instagram? I know you're quite active on there as well. You're always posting great content.
Yeah, thank you. So it's thesachinpatel.com. And Facebook is where they can also find me as well. The Sachin Patel, facebook.com/the Sachin Patel.
Okay.
And I try to, my philosophy, Ben, is probably just like yours, try to give as much value as you can. Yeah. I was just thinking about this morning. If somebody just went through my Facebook feed for the last year, they would have all the secrets and formulas for health and healing and repair. So I like to, I realized many years ago that I can't help everybody, but I can show them how to help themselves.
Right.
And so we just like to give valuable, practical information for people. So Facebook, the bundle is a great place. And then Instagram is another place as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I know today is one of those episodes that you're going to be going back listening to again, and you can tell just in everything Sachin gave today, the bundle that he's giving away, this is someone that wants to make an even bigger impact and difference. So the easiest way for us to help them is make sure you share this episode. Apply the principles, try it yourself, and let's make sure to share this episode. Thank you for tuning in. Sachin, thank you so much for your time. It's been an incredible conversation.
Thank you, Ben. So much love and gratitude. I appreciate you.
Amazing. Thank you.